And the former EPA Administrator, Christine Todd Whitman. She's now the paid co-chair of Clean and Safe Energy Coalition. She's also president of the energy lobbying group called the Whitman Strategy Group. And thank you very much for joining us on the set this morning.
Okay, so you work with the nuclear industry. So we've
one of my gigs.
One of your gigs. We've got that out on the table. We get paid for working in nuclear. So now that that's out on the table, I can just say, I think it's asinine what we have done over the past 30 years, when we've allowed France to fuel 80% of their economy on nuclear energy, and we have fallen so far behind. Why is that?
It really is too bad, because it's built on a series of missteps and miscommunication. I mean, frankly, the industry made some of its own mistakes. There's no question about that. You had Chernobyl then, and that was a kind of reactor that we never would have had in this country, ever. Then we had 3 Mile Island, which, in fact, if you look at it, while it was a meltdown, there was a problem. No two ways about that. But if the operators had left the reactor alone and let it do what it was programmed to do, you wouldn't have had the meltdown to begin with. And secondly, everybody was protected. There was no incident of exposure to high radiation. So anyway, but we got in this position where we said, we can't have any more. And we were worried about nuclear proliferation of weapons. And they're two separate things. I get that question a lot today. Well, what about nuclear weapons? And I want to say, what are we most worried about today? We're worried about North Korea, which has set off 4 nuclear, done how many tests now? It's 4 rockets, I guess, and 2 underground nuclear tests. And we haven't brought any new nuclear power online. So guess what, gang? That isn't a problem. They're doing it
but the
whether
thing
or not
is,
we use the power.
I mean, isn't it, you can talk about a lot of different things, but really doesn't this come out of 3 Mile Island?
Yeah.
And then the China syndrome.
Well, and people's basic
all of America scared of nuclear energy, and we just stepped away from it, while the French, again, fueled their economy.
80%. People don't realize 20% of our energy today comes from nuclear. We have 104 nuclear reactors around the country. 75% of our clean energy is nuclear. I mean, that's the other thing people don't understand. First of all, we have 104 reactors around the country. They've been operating safely. They're enormously good-paying jobs. I mean, the potential for new job growth in the nuclear industry is enormous. Really good-paying jobs, both and then in construction and in operating the plants. But it's the only form of base power that releases no emissions, no regulated emissions.
Where do you put the nuclear waste?
That is more of a political issue than it is a scientific issue. That we've designated a site called Yucca Mountain. First of all, if you took all the nuclear waste that we have today in this country from the 104 reactors, it would fill up 1 football field to the height of the goalposts. It's not something the size of the state of Connecticut.
So is the answer to nuclear waste, if we keep moving forward, to continue sending it to Nevada?
No. The answer is, well, we're not continuing. It would be to send it there ultimately. But no, the answer is to recycle and reprocess. France is doing it. Japan just opened a new recycling facility. You can take, there's 97% fissionable material left in those spent nuclear rods. You use that for more energy, and you can reduce it down to 2 to 3%. And the Japanese now have a way of mixing the plutonium and the uranium so that it's not weapons grade. So what you end up with something that's not weapons grade.
How is it that we end up in the 21st century with most people knowing more about wind power and being educated about other sources of power, like wind power, than we do about the potential for nuclear power?
Because you heard it, we've been scared of it. We've been scared off it. And then a lot of today's, well, actually in a survey that we did, about 67% of the American people favor some form of nuclear. You've heard President Obama say nuclear makes sense. You've heard Congress say that nuclear makes sense and it needs to be part of the mix. The real issue that we get into is we in this country love to have a simple solution, a silver bullet, one size fits all. So we want to say, okay, it's all going to be wind, or it's all going to be solar. It's all going to be nuclear. It's all going to be coal. It's not. It's going to be a mix. We're going to have everything.
How much of the nuclear argument revolves around the NIMBY argument? Not in my backyard. You know, we want nuclear power. We want the nuclear plant, but, you know, not in my town.
Well, the interesting thing is in the towns where you have reactors today, you have about an 88% approval rating, and people are comfortable with the idea of a new reactor coming online in that town. Because they've seen the benefits. Nuclear power plants produce some $430 million a year in revenues that they throw off, some $40 million in what they pay the employees. Because you have between 500 and 700 people working at a nuclear reactor.
But on the other side of that, what nuclear critics will say is it costs so much money to build a nuclear plant that it's just not cost effective for power companies. It takes too long for power plants to come up online. I mean, if we threw everything we had at building nuclear power plants, let's say GE, over the next decade, maybe we would be able to build 5, 6, 7.
Now, actually, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, while it still can take 43 months to get through the licensing process, because it is very strict, and it should be, it's now down to about 10 years to build a plant. That's why we need to get started now. But it's going to take time to build anything, and particularly if you put a cap on carbon, new coal-fired power plants are going to be much more expensive as well. Everything is going to be more expensive. I mean, that's the thing nobody wants to talk about. Power is going to be more expensive.
It doesn't expand the carbon footprint at all.
It doesn't expand the carbon footprint. And once it's online, nuclear power on a per kilowatt basis is the least expensive by far of the base fuels.
But what power company can afford to invest in nuclear energy because it's so cost prohibitive?
You have about 19 now consortium that have already gone to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission with proposals that they're talking about maybe some 30 new nuclear reactors. They won't be that many at the end of the day.
10 years?
10 years.
10 years? Who can afford to invest in something that's going to be...
Well, you're seeing them step up right now and saying they're willing to invest. And the federal government is going to take...
I know the Southern Company. I've got a friend that actually works for the Southern Company.
There are a couple in South Carolina and Florida. Florida Power and Electric is moving forward. They're parts of consortiums. As I say, there are 19 of them now that have come together that are willing to do this. What they're looking for is they'd like loan guarantees, not necessarily loans, but loan guarantees. And right now Congress is talking about putting together something that talks about green power. There's a difference here. If they put the language renewable in, you can't claim that nuclear is renewable because it uses uranium, and that's a finite resource, although we have plenty of it because it uses so little of it. We have plenty to go forward for the next 100 years. But it's green power, and that's the way it should be looked at, and it's competitive, and it's only part of the answer. It's not the sole answer. But
quick political
nice
question
and clean.
for you. Quick political question for you. Does Colin Powell belong in the Republican Party?
I think so. Yeah. He's my kind of Republican.
You belong in the Republican Party.
I grew up in it. My grandparents are involved.
Let me ask you, who do you think would stand a better chance of being elected in the state of New Jersey? A candidate like Colin Powell or, some of the Republicans who are claiming that he's not right for the Republican Party?
You are looking at the last Republican to carry the state of New Jersey.
Right.
We haven't carried it since 1997. If that tells you a little bit about my state. We're different. Every state's different. We're not going to all look the same, and that's why Republicans have got to get comfortable with the fact that if we want to be a voice at the table, if we want to make a difference in policy, we're going to have to accept that we're not all going to be in lockstep on every single issue.
Well
a
done.
big tent.
Agree with that.
Powered by nuclear
energy. Hey, that would be a good thing.
Whitman.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
We appreciate it.